In the last hour, the Ontario Provincial Police and the Canadian Border Services Agency have announced the bust of a major auto theft ring. Hundreds of vehicles have been seized, vehicles that were sent to a number of countries halfway around the world. And investigators say they hope disrupting the international criminal enterprise sends a strong message.
The surge in auto thefts over recent years has impacted the safety of our communities, families, and businesses. At the same time, it is fueling organized criminal networks to continue in their illicit activities. We want Canada to continue to be recognized as having a safe and secure border. Every seizure sends a clear message. The border is not open to criminals.
And the CBC's Meagan Fitzpatrick was at that briefing. She joins me now from Mississauga, Ontario. So Meagan, what more are you hearing from police about this auto theft bust?
Well, this coordinated investigation began all the way back in August of 2023, and it started with police investigating the theft of 4 vehicles. That then led them to this broader investigation, Arthi, where they alleged they uncovered an organized criminal group. Some of the members of that group, business owners in the Greater Toronto Area, businesses that are involved in the shipping industry, drivers involved in that industry as well. Police alleging that they were facilitating the shipment of these stolen vehicles to multiple countries in the Middle East and in Africa. They mentioned countries like Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Egypt, a number of countries. They, through their investigation, carried out multiple search warrants this past fall here in Mississauga, Brampton, Toronto, other places as well, including one search warrant carried out in Quebec as well. And that led to numerous arrests. But let's hear a bit more about how they carried out their investigation.
Intelligence from FinTrack identified illicit transactions linked to registered businesses, revealing the international scope of this network and its ties to transnational organized crime. By targeting the financial incentives and tools that enable these operations, we strike at the very foundation of organized crime and create a powerful deterrent.
So through those search warrants that were executed, police say they seized 306 vehicles. The combined worth of those vehicles, more than $25 million. They say the vehicles that were stolen were kind of a range of cars. Some were high-end luxury vehicles. Others were just more regular SUV, passenger commuter type vehicles that people would have. They also seized guns, key fobs, other technology used to steal vehicles, as well as a lot of cash, laptops, cell phones, and other equipment. So in the end, they've made 20 arrests as part of this investigation, and now those 20 people facing more than 130 criminal charges.
Now, Meagan, they also talked about how challenging this has been in terms of trying to break up these organized criminal rings. So why did they say that vehicle theft on this scale is so difficult to stop?
Well, they said partly because it's a low-risk, high-reward type criminal enterprise. And there are many reasons, they say, why it's difficult to tackle. But one question that came up at the news conference, Arthi, has to do with what role do the car manufacturers themselves play? How much are they doing to install anti-theft technology, for example? And we heard at the news conference that car companies, yes, they do try and upgrade the technology, but these are sophisticated criminals that very quickly find workarounds and ways to get around that technology. But we also heard that Canada does lag behind other countries in terms of what vehicle manufacturers here are required to do when it comes to anti-theft technology. Some of those requirements haven't been updated since 2007, we heard at the news conference. Now, some manufacturers go beyond what's required, but again, one of those challenges, perhaps not strict enough requirements for car manufacturers, but again, sophisticated criminals. Now, what we also heard is that things are getting a bit better in Canada in terms of the level of auto theft. We heard a few years ago it was surging back in 2023. In Ontario alone, more than 30,000 vehicles were stolen. But the police saying they've made strides in terms of tackling that issue. They have a dedicated team at the OPP, for example, working on this. We don't have the latest figures for this year, but in the first half of 2025, there were around 9,000 or so vehicles stolen in Ontario. So they say the trend has been going down, Arthi, but it's going down from a high point of a couple years ago. So they say there's still a lot of work to do, and that vehicle theft in Canada nationwide costs Canadians more than $1 billion a year in terms of insurance claims.
Okay. Thanks for this, Meagan. That is the CBC's Meagan Fitzpatrick in Mississauga, Ontario. And so, as we've been hearing, this investigation was incredibly complex, not just because of its reach overseas and its multi-agency involvement. So, to learn more about what goes into a big auto theft investigation, we want to bring in Gregory Brown. He served in the Ottawa Police Service for 28 years. He joins us from Safety Harbor, Florida. Thanks for making time for us today.
Good morning, Arthi.
So let's start with what we learned from that announcement from the OPP and the CBSA. 306 stolen vehicles destined for foreign markets were recovered. That's part of what we learned. Is that just the tip of the iceberg?
Sadly, that is the tip of the iceberg. The reporter, I think, just referenced the number 30,000. So math is not my discipline, but 300 out of 30,000 is a drop in the bucket for sure, although step in the right direction.
Step in the right direction in terms of what people can do as they watch how sophisticated these criminal organizations are. And we heard also from those officials who were speaking at the press conference, they essentially said that these criminal organizations are so advanced that they stay ahead of technology. What can you do to protect yourself?
Sadly, when I was speaking to your producer, there's not a lot as an individual consumer that you can do it. Absolutely correct. This is a highly organized activity. And so the criminal organizations that are involved in this do R&D development and research just the same as any major corporation does in terms of products. And so, the police will discover a technique that they're using, take measures to combat that. But this is such a lucrative enterprise. The organized crime groups are figuring out ways to work around police innovations, technology innovations. I myself can empathize with Canadians that have had their cars stolen. In 2017, I was working for the Criminal Intelligence Service of Ontario, sent on secondment from the Ottawa Police there. I was at a meeting in Toronto. I parked overnight at an airport hotel, a beautiful brand new Toyota Highlander SUV, unmarked police vehicle. And the next morning, I got to watch with the manager of the hotel, 3 guys steal my car, the government's car. At 3:30 in the morning, very sophisticated, defeated the car alarm within 15 or 20 seconds, plugged an iPad into the vehicle ignition system, reprogrammed the car, so my fob was essentially useless, went up the street, watched for any police response that might have been on the way from the car alarm. Of course, in society now, we're all immune. If you go to any parking lot, you hear, beep, 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 nobody ever looks anymore. And half an hour later, they show up, guy jumps in my driver's seat, and he's out onto Dixon Road, and it's their Toyota Highlander now destined for an overseas market.
I mean, that is an incredible amount of steps that were taken place to disable any sort of security in that vehicle, an unmarked police vehicle, no less. So with that in mind, and we were talking about what the average person might be able to do, what about car manufacturers? We were discussing that with a reporter too. Is there more, or are there more safety features that can be put in place that perhaps could prevent this from happening?
I'm not a tech expert, but I have friends that are pretty good at tech. And, clearly there would be a workaround. There would be some kind of kill switch mechanism that could be put in the car, but you're going to be playing a game with the organized groups. I think similarly in my career, I didn't work in organized auto theft or significant fraud investigations, but you think about secondary VINs, vehicle identification numbers, that are planted on vehicles in all kinds of supposedly secret spots. Even frontline police officers aren't supposed to know exactly where they are, because then it becomes public knowledge. But from my understanding, there's multiple positions on a vehicle where these VIN numbers are hidden, and the criminals are always figuring out a way to figure out where they are and defeat those secondary mechanisms. So I'm sure the auto manufacturers could design a kill switch mechanism. The criminals will immediately get to work at trying to figure out a way around that chip or whatever that technology would be. So it's always a permanent cat and mouse game. I guess the important thing for viewers to understand is this is a very organized, high money game that organized crime is playing. Completely agree with your reporter's suggestion that risk reward. As somebody that teaches law and criminology, we often talk about crime causations and correlations. criminals in this enterprise are very much risk-reward sort of motivated individuals. So if there's no big stick at the end of the day, the carrot is far too lucrative for them. These are rational choice actors, as we'd call them in the academic world. The only way to disincentivize them or to deter them is with much more significant punishment.
So much more significant punishment. We heard that question also be put towards the law enforcement officials as they talked about the potential for different or more stringent punitive measures as well. But of course, things like that do take time. We saw here also that 20 individuals were arrested, charged with 134 offenses. That's just 20 people. Surely there are so many more individuals involved in this. How far is the reach? How widespread are operations like this?
Well, it depends how extensive the police investigation was in this particular case. We're talking about a very expensive form of investigation. And so the low-level players are essentially disposable for the criminal organization. So if the 20 people arrested are the low-level actors that are paid to go and get certain cars on a shopping list, this is going to have zero impact. I'm not sure what the police officials said at the news conference. They generally like to say something similar to, this will put a big dent in things. If it's not the upper echelons of the organization, it certainly is not. These people are disposable. They'll be replaced by the end of today if the top of the organization isn't the one that's taken down. They will have a whole roster of people willing to go out and steal cars, and the 20 will be inconsequential.
You talked about, I finally wanted to ask you, you talked about how lucrative this is. How much are people taking away from this? How much are criminals making from this? And I know it will be a range from the low level to the high level, but how much could you stand to make, which is why it's so difficult to prevent people from entering a crime organization like this?
Sure. I mean, this is an illegal activity, so any kind of empirical data is very hard to pin down. But as the Toronto Police auto theft investigator said when I had the government's Toyota Highlander stolen, that's a $75,000 vehicle. He suggested this would probably sell for $100,000 in the Middle East or Africa, where it was en route through the Port of Montreal, undoubtedly. So multiply that by 30,000 vehicles as per your reporter's estimation. Like I said, I'm not great at math, but you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. Very lucrative, very low risk, very high reward. Something has to change legislatively, and I think the judiciary has to take this much more seriously. This would generally be termed a nonviolent property crime, unless we start getting into the home invasion auto thefts. That might have to be relooked at in our criminal justice system to put a little bit of teeth and some disincentive into this.
Gregory, I want to thank you for your insights on this. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, anytime.
That was Gregory Brown. He is a former police officer with the Ottawa Police Service.